Police confirm a young woman, Joyce Ann Sanders, has been found murdered near her home. The attack happened late this evening, just steps from her front door. Officers say she was walking alone when she was assaulted on a quiet residential street. No witnesses, no immediate suspect, and no sign of robbery. Neighbors are in shock as police seal off the area and begin a homicide investigation. Tonight, a safe neighborhood is asking one question: who killed Joyce Ann Sanders, and how did they vanish so fast?
She was almost home. In 1983, on an otherwise quiet night in California, Joyce Ann Sanders, a young woman with her entire future ahead of her, was attacked and murdered just steps from where she lived. Her body was discovered near her home, her life violently stolen in a crime so sudden, so personal, that it shattered the illusion of safety for everyone who lived on that street. There were no screams anyone could clearly recall, no witnesses who saw the killer's face, no clear explanation for why Joyce, and why that night. More than 4 decades later, her murder remains unsolved. This is the story of the murder of Joyce Ann Sanders, a case defined by silence, unanswered questions, and a killer who vanished into the darkness. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people believed nothing bad ever happened. Tree-lined streets, porch lights left on at night, neighbors who recognized each other's cars and routines. Joyce Ann Sanders lived just a short distance from where her body was found, close enough that investigators would later say she was likely nearly at her front door when she was attacked. That detail alone haunted the community, because it meant the killer didn't strike in some remote alley or unfamiliar place. He struck where Joyce felt safest. Police arrived quickly, sealing off the street as stunned neighbors stepped outside, unsure whether they were witnessing a nightmare or reality. Flashing red and blue lights washed over lawns and driveways. Radios crackled with urgent voices. And in the center of it all lay Joyce Ann Sanders, a young woman whose life had ended violently without warning and without explanation. Before she became a case file, before she became an unsolved mystery, Joyce Ann Sanders was simply Joyce. Friends and family would later describe her as a young woman trying to build a stable life, navigating adulthood, routines, responsibilities, and plans that never had the chance to unfold. She wasn't known to live recklessly. There was nothing in her background that suggested danger followed her home. That's what made her murder so terrifying. There was no obvious reason for someone to target Joyce. No clear motive, no known enemies. She lived an ordinary life and died in an extraordinary act of violence. Investigators believe Joyce was walking, possibly returning home from a short trip, an errand, or a visit when someone approached her. Exactly where the encounter began remains unclear. What is known is that Joyce did not make it inside her home. Somewhere along that short stretch of sidewalk, her routine night turned into a nightmare. Whether the attack was sudden or preceded by words, no one knows. There were no confirmed witnesses who saw the confrontation unfold. No neighbors who could definitively say they heard a struggle. Only fragments of sound, shadows, and uncertainty. And by the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Joyce Ann Sanders was found near her home, her body bearing signs of a violent attack. Police immediately understood they were dealing with a homicide. The location suggested the crime happened quickly, a burst of violence rather than a prolonged encounter. There was no indication Joyce had been transported from another location. This was where it happened. This was where she fell. Investigators searched the area carefully, the sidewalk, the street, nearby yards, hoping for anything the killer might have dropped or left behind. But the scene offered little. No clear trail, no obvious murder weapon recovered nearby, no immediate suspect, just a young woman dead in the place she should have been safest. Word spread fast. By morning, fear had taken hold of the neighborhood. Parents warned their children not to walk alone. Doors that had once stayed unlocked were suddenly bolted shut. Because if Joyce Ann Sanders could be murdered just steps from her front door, then no one felt safe. Rumors began almost immediately. Some believed Joyce had been followed. Others feared a stranger was lurking in the area. A few whispered about someone local, someone who knew her routine, but none of it came with proof. Detectives worked through the night and into the following days, piecing together Joyce's last known movements. They retraced her steps, interviewed neighbors, spoke with friends and family. They asked the same questions again and again. Who knew Joyce would be walking alone that night? Did she mention meeting anyone? Did anyone notice a strange car? A stranger lingering too long? But answers were scarce. Joyce hadn't expressed fear. She hadn't mentioned being followed. Nothing stood out as a warning sign. And that absence of warning terrified investigators as much as the crime itself. Days passed, then weeks, and still no arrest. No one matching a description, because there was no description. No clear suspect, because there was no obvious lead. Joyce Ann Sanders' murder began slipping into the most dangerous category of cases, the ones with nothing solid to chase. The killer had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a devastated family and a community forever changed. And as time moved forward, one chilling possibility became harder to ignore. Whoever killed Joyce might never be caught. As the initial shock faded, Joyce's case settled into the slow grind of unsolved homicide investigations. Leads were logged, tips were followed, then dismissed. Names were written down, crossed out, and revisited. But the truth remained elusive. Joyce Ann Sanders had been murdered near her home in 1983, and no one had been held accountable. And as years turned into decades, her case became more than just an investigation. It became a question that still hangs in the air. Who killed Joyce Ann Sanders, and how did they get away with it? In the days following Joyce Ann Sanders' murder, investigators turned to the autopsy for answers, hoping Joyce's injuries could reveal what the street could not. The medical examiner confirmed what police already feared. Joyce had been violently attacked, her death the result of deliberate, intentional harm. The injuries suggested close contact, not a distant act, not a random accident. This was personal in proximity if not in motive. There were no signs of prolonged captivity, no evidence she had been moved far from where she fell. Whatever happened unfolded quickly. A short, terrifying burst of violence that left Joyce no chance to escape or call for help. And yet, even the autopsy could not answer the most important question: why her? Detectives began reconstructing Joyce's final hours minute by minute, where she had been earlier that evening, who she spoke to, what time she was last seen alive. Friends and family were interviewed repeatedly, not because police suspected them, but because they were desperate to find anything out of place. A strange comment, a change in routine, a name mentioned casually and forgotten. But Joyce's night appeared ordinary. No secret meeting, no heated argument, no sign she felt uneasy, and that normalcy became one of the most disturbing aspects of the case, because it meant the danger didn't announce itself. From the very beginning, investigators faced a critical divide. Was Joyce killed by someone she knew or by a stranger? If it was someone familiar, then the attack may have involved trust. A moment where Joyce didn't immediately sense danger, a voice she recognized. But if it was a stranger, then Joyce had crossed paths with someone capable of sudden lethal violence, someone who struck without warning and disappeared without a trace. Both possibilities were equally terrifying, and neither came with proof. Police went door to door, canvassing the neighborhood in detail. They asked about unfamiliar vehicles, strangers walking late at night, arguments, noises, anything unusual. Some neighbors recalled hearing something, a sound they couldn't quite identify at the time. Others remembered nothing at all, and many felt guilt afterward. Guilt for not looking out the window, guilt for assuming someone else would call police, guilt for brushing off the night as just another quiet evening. But hindsight offered clarity that fear and uncertainty had stolen in the moment. One detail complicated the case even further. There were no clear signs of robbery. Joyce's belongings were not obviously taken. There was no evidence the crime had been motivated by theft alone. That pushed investigators away from the idea of a simple mugging gone wrong. Instead, it suggested something darker, an impulsive act, a sexual motive, or an attack driven by rage rather than gain. But without witnesses or forensic breakthroughs, motive remained speculation. In 1983, forensic science was limited by today's standards. DNA profiling as we know it did not yet exist. Evidence that might solve a case decades later could only be logged, preserved, and hoped upon. Hair samples, fibers, fingerprints. If Joyce's killer left something behind, investigators had no way of knowing whether it would ever speak. All they could do was collect and wait for technology to catch up. Over time, police looked into multiple individuals. Some were known offenders in the area. Others were people whose routines placed them nearby. A few were tips phoned in anonymously. Each lead sparked brief hope, and each eventually faded. No suspect could be firmly placed at the scene. No confession surfaced. No physical evidence tied anyone definitively to Joyce's murder. The case refused to give up its secrets. Long after the police tape came down, fear remained. Women avoided walking alone at night. Parents insisted on rides, no matter the distance. A sense of vigilance settled over the neighborhood. Joyce Ann Sanders' murder changed how people lived even without answers, because the killer was still out there, and no one knew who he was. For Joyce's family, time did not dull the pain, it sharpened it. Each unanswered question became a wound reopened. Each year without justice felt like another loss. They waited for calls that never came, hoped for breakthroughs that never arrived, and yet they refused to forget, because forgetting would mean letting the killer win. Eventually, the investigation slowed, not because police stopped caring, but because there was nowhere left to go. Joyce Ann Sanders' murder became a cold case, filed away, revisited periodically, waiting for something or someone to break the silence. And silence, it seemed, was exactly what the killer counted on. Decades later, the sidewalk where Joyce fell looks ordinary again. Cars pass. People walk dogs. Life goes on. But beneath that normalcy lies a truth that cannot be erased. A young woman was murdered here. Her killer was never identified, and justice remains unfinished. One of the earliest and most frightening theories was that Joyce Ann Sanders was killed by a stranger, someone passing through, someone watching from a distance, someone who saw an opportunity and took it. Investigators considered the possibility of a roaming offender, a man comfortable attacking at night, close to homes, confident he could disappear before anyone noticed. The lack of witnesses supported the idea. If the killer was unknown to Joyce, the encounter may have lasted only seconds. No conversation, no warning, just sudden violence. And if that were true, it meant Joyce was chosen not for who she was, but for where and when she happened to be. Criminal profilers often point to one detail that still chills investigators. Joyce was almost home. Offenders who strike so close to a victim's residence often believe time is on their side. They assume no one will suspect danger in such a familiar place. They rely on hesitation, on neighbors assuming everything is normal. That confidence suggests someone who understood how neighborhoods function, someone who knew people rarely intervene until it's too late. Another question haunted detectives: was Joyce's murder impulsive or planned? A crime of opportunity would suggest a predator who saw Joyce alone and acted on instinct. Someone driven by compulsion, not calculation. But the clean escape, no witnesses, no immediate trail, hinted at something more deliberate. Perhaps the killer had walked these streets before. Perhaps he knew the lighting. Perhaps he knew where to strike unseen. That uncertainty kept the case from settling into any single profile. Then there was the theory investigators were reluctant to dismiss, but hesitant to fully embrace. What if Joyce knew her killer? Crimes involving someone familiar often unfold quietly. No screams, no frantic resistance, just a brief moment where trust delays fear. If Joyce stopped to speak with someone she recognized, a neighbor, an acquaintance, someone she didn't perceive as a threat, the attack could have come without warning. But proving that kind of familiarity decades later proved nearly impossible. Joyce's routine may have been her greatest vulnerability. Investigators know that offenders often observe before they strike. They learn patterns, they wait. If someone had noticed Joyce walking alone regularly, even briefly, that knowledge could have been enough. No obsession required, no deep connection, just awareness. And that realization unsettled detectives because it meant the killer could have blended into everyday life unnoticed. Police quietly examined other unsolved assaults and murders in the region. Were there similarities? Attacks near homes? Victims walking alone at night? Some cases shared fragments of overlap, but nothing definitive. Still, the possibility lingered. What if Joyce's murder wasn't an isolated act? What if it was part of a pattern that never fully revealed itself? Based on what little evidence existed, investigators formed a tentative behavioral profile. The killer was likely male, comfortable moving through residential areas, capable of sudden violence without drawing attention. He may have lived nearby, or at least felt familiar with the neighborhood. And most chilling of all, he showed no signs of remorse in his actions, because people who feel guilt often make mistakes afterward. They talk, they slip. Joyce's killer did none of those things. Silence can be accidental, but it can also be deliberate. Some offenders understand that time erodes urgency, that memories fade, that witnesses move away or pass on. If Joyce's killer stayed silent long enough, he may have believed the case would simply dissolve, and in many ways it almost did. Years later, detectives would quietly wonder, did they miss something? A comment dismissed too quickly, a tip that didn't seem important at the time, a name that appeared once and never again. Cold cases often hinge on tiny details overlooked in the chaos of early investigation, and Joyce's case was no exception. Whoever killed Joyce Ann Sanders walked away that night, unnoticed, unchallenged, unafraid. He returned to normal life, went to work, spoke to people who never suspected a thing. And that idea that the killer blended in so completely is what still haunts those who remember Joyce. In Part 4, we'll examine renewed interest, modern forensic possibilities, and whether the passage of time could finally work against the person who thought he got away with murder. As the years passed, Joyce Ann Sanders' case never fully disappeared. It lingered in filing cabinets, in the memories of retired detectives, in the quiet determination of a family that refused to let her name fade. From time to time, someone would pull the file from the shelf, not because of a new lead, but because some cases demand to be remembered, and Joyce's was one of them. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, law enforcement agencies across California began forming dedicated cold case units. Their mission was simple but daunting: reopen cases that technology had once failed. Joyce's murder was a natural candidate. Her case had physical evidence, it had unanswered questions, and it had a killer who had never been identified. For the first time in decades, there was reason to believe the past might speak again. Investigators carefully re-examined what had been collected in 1983. Clothing, fibers, hair samples. Items that once sat quietly in storage were now treated as potential keys to everything. Because modern forensic science could extract meaning where none had existed before, or at least, that was the hope. DNA changed the rules of criminal investigation. It had solved murders decades old, exposed killers who thought they were safe, given voices back to victims long silenced. But DNA requires something to compare: a usable sample, a database match, a suspect to test. And Joyce's case faced a familiar obstacle. If her killer had left DNA, it had never been identified. Not every crime yields the evidence investigators hope for. Some offenders leave nothing usable, others benefit from the limitations of their time. Joyce's murder occurred before DNA collection was routine, before protocols ensured every possible trace was preserved, and that reality weighed heavily on those revisiting the case. Because even the best technology cannot create evidence where none exists. Cold case detectives did what they could. They re-interviewed neighbors, now older, slower, sometimes unsure of their own memories. They asked again about strange cars, about unfamiliar faces, about sounds dismissed long ago. Some details emerged, most did not. Time had done what time always does. It blurred the edges. For Joyce's family, each renewed effort brought a mixture of hope and pain. Hope that answers might finally come. Pain that they hadn't come sooner. They had learned not to expect miracles, but they still believed in truth. And belief, even after decades, can be a powerful thing. Time can protect killers, but it can also betray them. Witnesses die, memories fade, but guilt has a way of surfacing in unexpected ways. Sometimes through confessions, sometimes through DNA, sometimes through a single conversation that finally goes too far. Investigators hoped Joyce's killer might one day slip. Whoever killed Joyce in 1983 is no longer young. He has aged. He has carried the weight of that night for decades, whether consciously or not. And with age comes vulnerability, health problems, estranged relationships, the urge to confess before it's too late. All things investigators quietly watch for. Despite the years, Joyce Ann Sanders' case has never been closed. It remains open, unresolved, waiting. In Part 5, we'll examine the human cost of unsolved murder, the psychological toll on families and communities, and why Joyce's story still matters today. When a murder goes unsolved, the violence doesn't end with the crime. It lingers. It lives in empty rooms, in belongings that never get packed away, in birthdays that pass without celebration. Joyce Ann Sanders left behind more than a body on a sidewalk. She left behind a space no one could fill. Most grief eventually finds a shape, a reason, a resolution, a name to blame. But when a murder remains unsolved, grief has nowhere to go. There is no trial, no verdict, no moment where justice feels complete. Just questions that echo endlessly. Families of unsolved murder victims often live in a state of suspended reality. They replay memories obsessively, search for signs they missed, wonder if they unknowingly crossed paths with the killer. Every stranger feels like a possibility. Every knock on the door feels loaded with hope and dread, and that tension never truly fades. Joyce's murder reshaped her neighborhood in subtle but permanent ways. Trust eroded, routine changed, fear became a quiet companion. People learned to look over their shoulders, to lock doors earlier, to question what once felt safe. Even as years passed, the memory of that night lingered, a reminder that violence can strike without warning. Silence is the greatest ally of a killer. It protects, it conceals, it erases urgency. In Joyce Ann Sanders' case, silence has lasted decades, not just from the killer, but from anyone who might know something and has never spoken. One piece of information, one overheard confession, one memory dismissed as unimportant. Any of it could change everything. Cold cases aren't failures. They are reminders. Reminders that justice doesn't expire, that victims are more than statistics, that time does not erase responsibility. Every unsolved case represents a life interrupted and a truth waiting to be uncovered. Joyce Ann Sanders deserves that truth. The most unsettling reality is this: Joyce's killer didn't disappear into myth. He blended in. He lived among people who had no idea what he'd done, worked jobs, formed relationships, passed through life without consequence. And that possibility that he was hiding in plain sight is what makes remembering Joyce so important. Public memory keeps cases alive. Every story retold, every name spoken aloud, every person who listens, it pushes back against forgetting, the very thing killers rely on most. By remembering Joyce Ann Sanders, we deny her killer the comfort of anonymity. To the person who killed Joyce, or to anyone who knows what happened, time has not erased what you did. The truth still waits, and silence cannot protect you forever. Joyce Ann Sanders was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman with a future she never got to live. Her story matters, not because of how she died, but because of who she was. And as long as her name is spoken, her case is not truly cold. In 1983, Joyce Ann Sanders was murdered near her home in California. The case remains unsolved, but the search for truth continues. Because justice delayed is not justice denied, and silence, no matter how long it lasts, can still be broken. If you want more gripping true crime stories like this, hit like and subscribe and never miss a case.